عليكم طلاب. محاضرتنا لهذا اليوم راح نبدي بالآيرون and the iron is play important role as a constituent of hemoglobin, but also it is play important role in the synthesis of many other substances like myoglobin, peroxidase, cytochrome. The iron in the body, the total quantity of iron is about 4 to 5 gram, and about 65% is present in hemoglobin. About 4% present in myoglobin within muscles. 1% is present as in other important component, and it will form about 0.1% combined with a special protein which is called transferrin, and this protein is present in plasma. About 15 to 30% of iron is stored as ferritin, and in this form it will combine with another protein which is called apoferritin. So the iron with apoferritin will form the ferritin, and this is the stored form of iron. After absorption of iron, the iron is combined with apotransferrin, which is a protein present in plasma, to form the transferrin. So transferrin is bounded with iron, and this type is carried in the plasma, and it's transported to the other sites and in order to be used by the tissues in the body. And in fact, the binding of iron with transferrin is loosely bounded, so it can be released easily. Excess iron is deposited in the hepatocytes, and within the hepatocyte it will bind with the apoferritin to form the ferritin, which is the storage pool of iron. And when the amount exceeding the storage pool of ferritin, it will form another form which is called hemosiderin, and this is the insoluble form of iron, and this will be formed when the amount of iron exceeding the storage pool of ferritin, and this occur within the cells of the liver hepatocytes or the cells of the reticuloendothelial system. When the iron is low in the plasma, so the iron in the ferritin is released, and when it's released, it will be transported to the plasma in the form of transferrin. And this transferrin in which the iron is bounded, as we said, it is loosely bounded, and then this will carry to a specific receptor on the cell membrane of the erythroblast in order to be and then it will enter the erythroblast by endocytosis, and within the erythroblast the iron will be delivered into the mitochondria to synthesize hemoglobin. The absorption of iron is occur in the small intestine when the transferrin is transported to the cell membrane of the gastrointestinal tract, and by binding to a specific receptor, it will be absorbed within the small intestine. So here we have the old red blood cells, and after they are ending their lifespan, their hemoglobin will be released by the macrophages, and the iron within the hemoglobin will be transported either to be stored as the ferritin within the hepatocyte, or it can be transported to the plasma as transferrin when there is needed for the iron, it will be transported to the erythroblast to synthesize hemoglobin. Or a small amount of iron will be excreted to the outside, and if there is a decrease in the amount of transferrin, it will be replaced by the from the site of its absorption in the small intestine. The other form of the other structure which is present in the hemoglobin is the bilirubin, and the bilirubin is as we know, as will be excreted in the bile. Now we will deal with pathological condition in which there is a decrease in the number of the red blood cells or a decrease in the amount of hemoglobin, and this will cause what we call anemia. So anemia means a deficiency in the hemoglobin or in the red blood cell count. And anemia can occur due to many reasons, like in a blood loss, when there is blood loss, and if there is rapid hemorrhage, the fluid compartment of the plasma will be replaced within 1 to 3 days, and this will result in a low concentrated blood, because the red blood cells need time to be replaced. And in fact, if there is no secondary hemorrhage, the red blood cell will return to normal within 3 to 6 weeks. But if there is secondary hemorrhage, or if the blood loss is chronic, it will lead to a defect in the absorption of the when there is a defect in the absorption of the iron, and this will cause a decrease in the number of the red blood cells. The red blood cells will be small, and size is small, and the amount of hemoglobin will be less than normal, and it will cause what we call microcytic hypochromic anemia. So microcytic hypochromic anemia means the size of the red blood cell is smaller than normal, and the amount of hemoglobin is little due to the defect in the amount of the iron, which causes a decrease in the amount of hemoglobin. The other type of anemia is called aplastic anemia, and this type occurs due to destruction in the bone marrow. And as you know, the bone marrow play important role in the regeneration of the red blood cell. The destruction of the bone marrow can occur due to exposure to excessive radiation, or due to taking certain chemicals which cause destruction of bone marrow, or by drugs. The other type of anemia is called megaloblastic anemia, and in this type it occurs due to a deficiency of vitamin B12 or folic acid deficiency. And as you know, vitamin B12 and folic acid play an important role in the synthesis of the DNA of the red blood cells. So we will have a failure of maturation and division of the red blood cells. Also, this type of anemia occurs when there is deficiency of intrinsic factor, and as you know, this intrinsic factor play important role in the absorption of vitamin B12. The intrinsic factor is released by parietal cell in the stomach. So if we have a disease in the stomach affecting the parietal cells, like due to atrophy in the gastric mucosa, or due to a surgery, partial removal of the stomach, or complete gastrectomy, there will be a decrease in the intrinsic factor synthesis, and there will be a defect in the absorption of vitamin B12, because intrinsic factor will combine vitamin B12 when it reaches stomach, and it will by its binding to intrinsic factor, it will resist the digestion or the destruction by the gastric secretion, and it will carry the vitamin B12 to the site of its absorption in the terminal ileum, and it will bind a specific receptor there in order to facilitate facilitate the absorption of vitamin B12. So when the intrinsic factor is decreased, there is a defect in the absorption of vitamin B12 and result in the megaloblastic anemia. So if there is disease in the small intestine, like in SUPRU, or due to the destruction in the mucosa of the small intestine, it will cause defect in the absorption of vitamin B12 and result in the megaloblastic anemia. The cell in the megaloblastic anemia, the red blood cell, will be larger than normal, but they have a delicate membrane and it will destroy it easily. The other type of anemia is called hemolytic anemia. Hemolytic anemia include a different type of anemia, like in type of hereditary spherocytosis or sickle cell anemia or erythroblastose fetalis. All these are hemolytic anemia, and the number of the red blood cell in this type either normal or it might be above the normal, but it have a short lifespan, so they are ended their life in a short time and causing this type of anemia. The cause of their short lifespan, in fact, due to they have a different shape of the red blood cells, like in hereditary spherocytosis, the shape will be spherical instead of being biconcave. So this type of cell have lose the elasticity of the cell membrane, and they are destroyed easily when they are passing through the small or tiny blood vessels. They will be destroyed. And in the sickle cell anemia also, as we discussed previously, there is abnormal shape, and because the presence of intracellular crystals, this will cause destruction of the cell membrane. The other type is erythroblastose fetalis, and this type is occurred due to is occurred in the infant with Rh positive and their mother are Rh negative. So the mother forming antibodies which passes through the placenta and reaching the fetal circulation and causing destruction of the red blood cells of the fetus. The end result is hemolytic anemia. Now we will discuss the effect of anemia on the circulatory system. As you know, the viscosity of the blood depends on the red blood cells, and when we have a decrease in the number of the red blood cells, this will result in a decrease in the blood viscosity. And as the blood viscosity become decrease, the blood flow will be increased. The blood flow of the blood in the blood vessels, because there is decrease in the resistance, so increase in the blood flow, and this will cause increase in the venous retention and then increase in the cardiac output. Because in anemia there is a decrease in the oxygen transported by the cell to the tissue, so there is a vasodilatation to increase the amount of the oxygen to the tissues, and this will also cause increase in the venous retention and then increase in the cardiac output to compensate the decrease in the amount of oxygen. So we have an increase in the cardiac output of a patient with anemia to compensate the decrease in the oxygen amount. But in exercise, when there is an exercise, we need to increase the amount of oxygen to the tissue. So the cardiac output must be increased. But in anemic patient, they have already increased in the cardiac output, so the heart will unable to pump in another extra amount of blood, and If it do that, it will causes cardiac or heart failure later on. So the end result of anemic patient, it might be ended with a heart failure. At last, we will deal with another subject, which is called polycythemia. And polycythemia means increase in the number of the red blood cells. The polycythemia could be physiological polycythemia, and in this type there is increase in the number of the red blood cells as occur in those who are living in high altitude due to decrease in the amount of oxygen. So to overcome this problem, there is increase in the number of the red blood cells. Or it might occur a secondary to disease, like in decrease in the oxygen which is delivered to the tissue due to diseases in the heart or in the lungs. So respiratory disease or cardiac disease could be associated with polycythemia, and in this case we call it secondary polycythemia. The number of the red blood cell in polycythemia, as we said, is exceeding the normal. It might reach to about 7 to 8 million per cubic millimeter, and it might cause increase in the viscosity of the blood. This is our lecture today, and thanks a lot for your kind listening.